Hello, hello.
Hey,
Give me one sec while I close all my tabs, etc. Um, we'll go over a little bit on the state of CD events right now and what became of the meeting earlier today. Go over some of the agenda items from there. Give me one sec. Let me share my screen. Da, da, da. All right. So Asia, Europe. This is America. Oh, come on. All right. And then we'll just copy this and then the agenda. All right, cool. Um, so get sign in, please. Let me put the link in the chat just to make that easier. If I can find the button, which seemed to have disappeared. There it is. All right. Da, da, da. All right, so we got quite a few things done for zero point 0.5. We moved the subject dot type. Content dot outcome is an enum, so we moved those two over. One thing that I'm going to do this week is look at 187, which is mostly more of a discussion right now. It's So this is all pertaining to zero point 0.5, just to be clear. So David, he is based out of Europe, and he is a very active member here. And he brought up one thing that he thinks that well, basically to make the spec a little bit more consistent. So he does a lot of vetting and code generation for Rust. So Rust is a little bit more strongly typed than than some other languages, specifically like Go, a little bit more fancy with the interfaces, or allows a lot more with the interfaces, and then got like Python, etc. So he runs in a lot of issues, and he likes to make his generators really, really simple and consistent. And because we have some inconsistencies with the idea, for instance, being like this, as opposed to like something like this. He doesn't know when to camel case it to do like lookups, because pipeline run, right? So let me write it up here, should look like this, but instead we just have this. So he needs to specifically do a transformation on that, as opposed to like if there's a dash, he could just like, you know, imply that there's a camel case coming up, right, to capitalize that first letter. So that's what he's asking for here. So I can definitely add that. And then we could add some unit tests to kind of like help enforce this as well. So those are going to be two things that I will do this weekend to kind of help that get that ball rolling. Um, this one is assigned to Andrea, another maintainer here. So this one is just talking about so I don't know how familiar you are with the conformance tests, to kind of give you a better idea of what we're talking about here. Yeah, let me actually open this up here. So if we look at the conformance tests, and when you look at this, you see that there is a version here, and then there's this weird version here as well. Out of curiosity, Luke, when you see these two versions, what do you think they mean?
um, I think that's an excellent question. Like as I've looked through and like attempted my own mappings, and you might see this in like what I'm trying to do in Argo, where it's like, I'm mapped through, I think like, oh, it's like, oh, I've got these mappings and I said, this event or something like that. It's like, oh, this is a 0.3 or a 0.2 or a something. And it's like but also I know like 0.5 is coming out. Should I just like in my spec, like everything should just be 0.5? Yeah, like trying to track type and version, what those numbers are. Like
It's not
um,
clear, right?
right,
So
right. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not sure what I'm tracking, and is it like, do I need, I'm trying to think what a good example is. Like, is there a like parent version saying like whatever work I'm doing, like I'm gonna ensure Argo is compliant to 0.5 or something like
Mhm.
that, or 0.4. Can I just say that once versus every field and type that I'm trying to populate? Does, oh, this field is 0.2, this field is 0.3. Um,
Right, right. So let me explain like what it is and then what the proposed solution is. And I'm of the other side of the fence on how this should work. So, while everyone thinks they should kind of remain like this, but because there are two versions, I think that makes it confusing. So for instance, we have this version, right? This is actually the CD events version of just the spec overall. It's completely independent of these types, if you will. So, well, it's not really completely independent. It's just like it's the spec version. It's the whole release of basically everything. Um, so we have this version here, which is actually tied to this definition, this event's definition. So the reason why that was done is because if we do an update to one, let's say we just do a one event update, right? We
mhm.
might not necessarily want to version bump the spec was the idea. So instead, we could do independent versioning of each event itself, which would allow things consumers to consume the same version of that particular event that wasn't changed and not know it would know not needing to do anything. So the newer versions, if this got updated, would be like, hey, there's a new version of this particular event. We need to change or do something, right? So that was the idea, is that events themselves at a granular level or at atomic level, an event being the most atomic thing here, let's assume that, would have its own versioning. So when things consume it and it would know whether or not it would need to make a change, for example. The 0.5 is more of just a spec version, just to let you know that like a breaking change is coming, or et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that helps a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. So
Would you, but you don't, are you thinking about for the spec, like your 0.51, like for the patch digit, like 0.5.1 or something like that, that if I saw that, I would know, oh, there's some field somewhere that has incremented or has changed.
yeah, but that's the thing though, is like people would then need to like know like what has changed. So I think the idea would be that this would, like if you imagine like an event is coming or you consume an event from the bus, right?
Yeah,
It would show, let's assume that we got rid of this. This didn't exist, right? This patch version gets bumped, right, to 0.1. But this deleted event didn't change. How would you know code wise whether or not you needed to change anything, right? Like you would
yeah,
actually need to like go to the like the change log or the release notes and determine that, right?
yeah.
However, in my opinion, that is a normal piece of flow. Like that's the normality of things, right? When you do a patch version, um, that means it's not a breaking change, right? That means that you can continue to use the events as if they were not changed at all, right? So I am of the opinion that we should just have one version, but like I said, think I think I'm the only one that's on that that's on that side of the fence. And what the proposed solution is instead that we will just rename version to be spec version, which I think that just makes it moves the confusion because then you look at this and wonder what that is. But that's just my opinion. But what is your take on renaming this field from version to spec version?
I mean, do you want to say CD spec
No, I think the proposed solution is actually just spec version.
version? Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah, it's this.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I guess I'm okay with these details. It's like as we're discussing, maybe take our YouTube recording of this and have an AI turn it into a blog or something as we're explaining these things, learning these things. I would assume that's maybe the motivation with the SDKs and such that we can abstract some of these concerns. Or I guess would SDKs see like patch version increments because like just the deleted event has a change now or something?
Yeah, yeah. The SDK, well, right now the SDKs don't do that, but in
Yeah.
theory, in the future, they would is the goal. So like it'd be able to like know when something's broken or if they need to modify something as something's coming in.
Yeah.
Or we could just say, this is a major version update for this event version and um just just throw an error, for example, right? So I am okay keeping this, but I just wanted to make sure does adding renaming version to spec version actually make it more clear that that's what this is describing? Or do you feel like, because I'm of the same vein, I think we need to document this because it's very, very confusing.
Yeah. Um, yeah, yeah, I think spec version, I think adding every little detail would help for sure. I think I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Um, and then yeah, beyond that, it's helpful to see that. And I mean, yeah, I guess I appreciate that you have spec version versus type, so it gives you some modularity in the spec, so you can kind of adjust things
Yep. Yep.
as you're progressing. And yeah, I think it just perhaps puts emphasis on, again, like the SDKs or some things like how do we make this easier to consume long term? Mhm.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, cool. Well, I just wanted to make sure that that makes sense. And I saw Victor just join. So, hey, Victor, if you want to please sign in, I posted the link in the chat, so you should be able to see it. And you should be able to visit here and sign in. Um, and and we're just kind of discussing right now 0.5. We're about halfway through the issues that we're going to include for 0.5. Um, and and we created another issue here, which I'll go to the next one because this one's kind of interesting. Um, so this is another one that David created. I don't like this one. I don't think it's a good idea. So he's thinking that we should remove the build subject because it can be covered by task. But you could argue that for basically any event. Any event technically could just be a task event because task is just anything. Um, and the reason why is because inside of here is we have pipeline run, task run, test case run is now test case is now test case run, test suite is now test suite run. But build is not build run because build is already kind of a verb. And the primary issue is because we selected run. It should actually be execution, but the reason why execution wasn't selected is because it's long. But I don't think that is a good argument personally. I think it should be pipeline execution or exec ID even, or exec pipeline exec would be fine. Task execution, build execution then makes sense as opposed to build run. I think even build run is fine. So I don't think we should we should remove it. Um, and the primary reason why David brought this up, though, which I think does have some validity, is that the build itself isn't properly defined. And what I mean by that is generally when people are sending events, they send it within the definitions of whatever their tool, however their tool defines something. So for instance, right, if you go to Jenkins, Jenkins has their own definition of what a build might look like. And then if you go to Circle CI, for example, they have their own definition of what a build. And I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. Instead, we need to flip it the other direction, and CDEvents need to come up with their own definition of what a build is, what a pipeline is, and tools need to follow that, or not follow it, but when the things that line up inside of their systems match whatever the definition is, then they send the event, because that's the only way you can get interoperability rather than trying to do it the other direction. Because if tools all have their own definitions, then you can't really have interoperability at that point. So I think what we need to do is, I think I'm going to spend some time today and over course of this week defining just what build is first. I'm going to start with just one and incrementally go at it. But what is your take on this is to remove build?
Um, I guess it'd be interesting as you're thinking about like, what is a build that is abstracted from all the tools, um, and seeing what comes out of that. I don't necessarily have an opinion of removing it or not. Um, yeah, thinking about that, I could toss in some other things to think about, coming from like again, wanting to map in Argo CD. So
Right,
Argo
right.
Argo CD today, like there's it is Argo is a say agent of the GitOps process. There are enhancements coming into Argo CD where they're trying to, there's some ideas about bringing some more components of the GitOps process into Argo CD. So it's not just the agent, but it's also doing your GitOps quote unquote builds,
Mhm.
depending on how you do your GitOps, if it's like Helm versus customize versus some other configuration as code management things where there's kind of this, I'm going to take some, if it's Terraform or Helm or something, and I'm going to render these things and get kind of this outputted config, and then I'm going to commit that into my GitOps repo, and Argo then synchronizes that so that Argo in GitOps, there is kind of this build, some people call it a rendering
Mhm.
things. So that I just want to make your thought
Yeah,
process
yeah,
more
yeah. So yeah,
complex now, saying,
you actually touched on something, because we're in the process of thinking about that as well for Spinnaker. So that's the team that I work on. So
yeah,
Spinnaker also has that same concept of like we call it templating or rendering, like you would suggest.
yeah,
And but it does fit build though, because what you're doing is you're
right.
technically building something to then be deployed, right? So I completely am in the same um line of thinking as you. And and yeah, I think when I start defining what build is, right, it will probably encompass the CD space as well. And that means that when we think of builds, it might not only be limited to CI. It also might be something that CD can do, right? As long as you fit the definition, right? So yeah, but I totally get what you're saying though.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, yeah, that'd be interesting for a holistic life cycle of your application that, oh, you did three builds. There was a CI build, there was a configuration build, there was something else build,
Mhm.
uh, which, yeah, just becomes interesting how you consume all of that. Mm.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely some things to think about. But like I said, I'll start with the definition. I think starting with one and just getting one right is a major step.
Yeah.
So, where we make it, where it makes sense for how tools can use it. And then down the line, like visualization tools, like how they can go ahead and parse, that information. Like, was this CI build, like you were saying, or was this like a CD build, like a rendering, for example, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, how do we go about making sense of that. So that'll be definitely something I'll think about, and we can kind of
All right.
leverage some of that once I come up with a definition. But yeah, that'll be something that I do this week as well. So yeah, with that said, we should have these last ones done probably in the next couple of weeks because these are actually a lighter version of this. Or lighter than doing these because these are actually like major code changes and like removing this from all the conformance tests, for example, needed the subject type removed. So, but this helps that. But this, yeah, I mean, what I meant, sorry, the these ones don't require a massive amount of subject type changes. So these are a lot less manually involved is what I'm getting at. So we can definitely have these knocked out in the next couple of weeks and then do the release. So but yeah. So with that said, that's the kind of the state of 0.5. We're making progress. It's taking a little bit, but we are making progress. And I still haven't had. I was out last week, as you saw from my Slack message. So
Yeah.
I haven't had the chance to look at the Argo PR. But let's actually bring it up. Let me see here. Da, da,
Yeah,
da,
and I
da.
know David has posted some things in Slack I haven't looked at yet. But
Okay. Let's take a look here because let's go to the markdown to make this easier to read. All right. Let's see events. So is there anything in particular here that you really want us to look at
I think some of the just the mappings down here. Yeah, so
down
this,
here? This one?
yeah,
Okay.
and I think this is an example where I probably got confused where it's like, oh, the spec, like you said, is 0.5 or something, but and I keep finding myself like, oh, should I all of these events, like, oh, should I be calling every single event like 0.5 to be matching that spec versus I think you helped me understand. I was like, oh no, every event has its own version.
Subversion. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So like as I've mapped here, I think I've left these as they should be. So like, service
Mhm.
dot deployed is 0.3 versus ticket dot closed is 0.2, something
Yeah,
like
yeah. So this is
that.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So let's take a look here. So service dot deployed. So service deployed to a new environment. So this is just a normal deployed event. So that looks right. Um, So when you see service removed, is this an actual concept in Argo, like removing, or is this just another like deployed, like you're deploying a removal of something? Like how does this work in Argo?
Um, so Argo has it logically thinks of your application as Argo uses the word application.
Hmm.
So all events are tied to an application. You create the application, which would then be the first deployment and all subsequent deployments or upgrades. You can delete the application, which would obviously remove it. Um, so it's um, this is with Argo and GitOps where your Git repo becomes your control plane. So if you delete your app in Git, Argo will delete it out of a cluster kind of thing. Um,
So it is a concept. Okay, so this actually makes because we were trying to find a use case where removed made sense, and it looks like it does make sense for Argo because it does because of how it's organized. Because in Spinnaker, you're organized not by the application, you're organized by pipelines. And pipelines determine whether or not something gets updated, essentially. And an update could be a removal. But because you have the noun, which is the service, or in this case, the application, as the thing that kind of houses everything, when you delete that, it actually deletes the actual, like it actually removes the service from like Kubernetes, for example.
yep.
So,
Yep.
okay, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. What about rolled back? How does that work in Argo? Is that an actual concept? Because again, for Spinnaker, it's only a concept if the deployment strategy has like a like blue green deployment, for example.
Yeah. Um, that's a good question here in Argos. Like Argo CD itself, um, it it's not it it kind of has a rollback capability that almost no one ever uses because again, if you're doing proper Git ops, you're kind of always rolling forward. You go back to your Git repo and you make a revert commit or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So you're kind of, yeah, rolling forward, though there's another component of Argo called Argo rollouts that does then implement blue, green, and canary strategies. And that other component, Argo rollouts, it can um, roll back. And it's essentially when it's attempting to roll forward in new updates, it does its blue-green tests, those fail, it stops that rolling forward and
Hmm.
it just prevents you, yeah, kind of stops you from rolling forward. It doesn't say roll back something. Um, so I don't know in say like in my Hello World work here that I'm going to ever touch the rollout stuff. I mean I think this is a discussion to keep figuring out like how these things map and such.
Yeah, yeah, because that's what I was getting at. Because like in Spinnaker, it kind of maps oddly because like it's the same way in Spinnaker. People are typically rolling forward and not backwards. So it's
Right.
definitely an interesting one where we might want to reconsider rolled back to be something different. Maybe have a roll just roll forward even. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, that
Right.
I wanted to ask because it seems like you're in the same line of thought there.
Right.
Um,
And it's kind of a mix of like again, CD events being this interoperability standard that works for a variety of tools and situations, even though like say Argo and Spinnaker might be pushing like, no, we might be really pushing on a kind of immutable infrastructure type mindset. It's like, oh, you keep rolling forward kind of thing. So
mhm.
that rollback might not ever apply to us, but that's not going to say, out of all tools in the world, it might apply for someone else though.
Right, right. Um, yeah, and that's why we're going to be opinionated on the definitions and
Yeah.
try to get that right. But okay, cool. So I'll take a look at this actually after my stand up, which is here in like an hour or 30 minutes actually. But I wanted to close out early today because I have another meeting that I can't miss. Um, so was there any other things that we wanted to address or does this look good in terms of zero point 0.5? Are we happy with this?
I don't have anything, any issues with the 0.5 spec. We're just curious how CD events as it's developed, do you release on a scheduled cadence or anything like that?
We try to, but not right now. We try to do every 6 months. But last year things just kind of like got misaligned with everything. So we're trying to move back to that. So but expect like every 6 months is going to be the goal.
All right, gotcha.
So yeah, if there's no other questions, yeah, thank you both, Victor and Luke. I'll talk to you guys in Slack, and then if you have any other questions, please let me know. And then yeah, I'll ping you, Luke, after I finish looking at your proposal. All right.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, sounds good. All right, I'll talk to you guys later then. All right.
See you.
All right, bye.